Hey people, so I want to do a video about my views on church. Okay, so first of all, my goal is not to, criticize any specific individuals or just leave a bad taste in anybody's mouth, but really just to share frustrations with church, and I'm sure you will identify with many of them. And hopefully this will just be a thought-provoking video that will eventually lead to, people wanting to change things and do things differently. So church, in my mind, has massively stepped away from the biblical model of the early church. And what we see is today in pretty much every church is a hierarchical structure that does not follow biblical principles, and usually that looks like a man that is leading it, and that man we call pastor. That man often does not even have the gifting of pastor, but he may be the most charismatic man there. He may be a man that has gone to seminary for X amount of years. He may be a man of vision that wanted to see something happen, and so he started a church or some sort of movement. And in the Bible it talks about the fivefold ministry. It talks about apostles, prophets, pastors, teachers, and evangelists, and those are to be functioning within the church. The apostle is to start new works and oversee different churches, different works. But in most churches, we do not see what you call the fivefold ministry. And it again is the pastor at the top. Now this creates a problem because you've got pretty much everything coming from this man at the top and his ways of thinking. And that many pastors, I think, have an amazing heart, and they have gifting, and they truly do want to shepherd people. And they give so much of themselves to the work, to the service of the Lord. Many pastors do not have, they're not gifted pastorally, and they may be, gifted in other areas, but they end up getting caught in this area where they're not even gifted, and that can end up hurting a lot of people, damaging a lot of people. And as a whole, in churches, we see many people that are on the fringes or struggling and really not doing well, and lonely, have so many issues. They're not growing, they're not moving forward, and we wonder why is that. Well, part of the problem is that you've got one man that's trying to do everything and trying to be the head of the church. And how can one man take care of all these people? It's just not possible. You think of one nurse trying to take care of all these different patients all in his own. And that's probably even a better analogy, because a doctor actually does his rounds and stuff like that and checks in with his patients. But a pastor is just, I'll see you on a Sunday, and that's it. And that leads to other issues with church, is that we think that people are supposed to grow on their own by one meeting a week, and by an hour sermon or less than an hour sermon. And are people being brought to maturity in churches? Are people being strengthened and encouraged through things like fellowship, discipleship, Bible study? No, they're not, by and large. And most people are left empty, isolated, struggling. And the purpose of a pastor is to sort of keep people protected, looked after, keep them in the fold, keep away wolves. And just because of churches are often so large nowadays, that isn't possible, which leads me to another problem. What would help in these situations is if other people in congregations were raised up, affirmed, that their giftings were stirred up and developed and acknowledged. Wouldn't that be a thing if that happened in churches, if giftings were acknowledged and people were allowed to come into leadership, to come into maturity? Every believer has a gifting. Not every believer has maturity because nobody is helping them go through that process. And, giftings should be uncovered through ministry, through doing ministry. And it happens when people affirm what is in you. And oftentimes you don't even know what your gifting is until somebody affirms that in you, because you're just doing stuff. You're just kind of naturally doing. And it's not necessarily to come by doing an online spiritual gifts test, but by doing stuff, doing ministry. And many churches aren't doing ministry. They're not providing opportunities for people to minister because either they haven't been to seminary for 4 years. Just may I add, no disciple went to seminary. They did spend quite a bit of time with Jesus, but I don't want to get into that whole rabbit hole. But the church as a whole is struggling, and I think many people are sad. They're dissatisfied. They're not growing in maturity. They don't know who they are. We see very little growth in the church. Growth typically takes the form of people coming from other churches that are dissatisfied, and they're probably dissatisfied for the same reasons that they'll become dissatisfied at your church. And there's very little evangelism done. If there is an evangelist, we don't really know what to do with them. We don't know how to help develop their gifts. And, when an evangelist brings a new person to church, evangelists typically aren't geared for ongoing discipleship. There should be other giftings that help do that, including teachers, pastors, stuff like that. And the problem is that it's like we think the pastor. That is wrong thinking, and it needs to be the whole body taking over, not taking over, but doing the work of the kingdom, seeing people discipled and all those things. And if we keep having this mentality of the pastor, see, it's not the pastors that are just responsible for this. The pastors are following this model, this unbiblical model, and we as believers need to rise up and create something new, create more home churches, more standalone churches that that we're looking for people within these groups to develop and mature and to bring into leadership so they can lead a work, they can lead a group. Anybody can do that. No, not anybody, but there's so much people that can if they're taught to do it and believed in. I was in YWAM for many years, Youth of the Mission, and one of the things I loved about YWAM is that they recognized gifting and they gave you opportunity to push you out of your comfort zone because they believed in you. And the confidence that gives you when you are pushed out your comfort zone because people believe in you, and you do something you don't think you can do, and you can do it well because of the giftings that is in you that people are affirming, amazing things happen. But we don't see that happen in the church. Rarely. And it's a very sad thing, and that's why we don't see growth. That's why we don't see massive change. So many churches don't even do any outreach. Or if they do, it's just, the gospel isn't preached. And many Christians, in my experience as an evangelist, are terrified to go do evangelism. They have no idea how to do that. Part of the gifting of an evangelist is to equip others. They have the ability to teach them how to do that, to stir up boldness, to stir up faith, to give them practical tools on how to do that. But because evangelists aren't, and other people with giftings aren't given place in the church, the pastor is, and maybe the worship leader, that doesn't happen. And so we just get this holy little huddle, or it could be a huge huddle where you've got one mega man at the top, and everybody worships him and thinks he has all the answers, and his ego can't even fit through the door almost. And we see that. We see that every day. We see that on Facebook, people posting videos of big name preachers. That's not how the kingdom works, my friends. That is not how it works, and it's time for a change. So there's a lot more I could say on this. I would love to hear your thoughts, your inputs. I don't know if you're tired with normal church. I certainly am.